Hi, and welcome to this AI in C# video on the Microsoft Agent Framework. So, over the last 1.5 months that Agent Framework have been out, I've been going through it a lot and finding it great, but also a bit cumbersome here and there. So what I have done now is I have sat down and actually make a set of NuGet packages that go on top of the Agent Framework that makes it easier to use. And I'm gonna try to introduce them in this video. I get a sneak peek of it in my live streams, but now let's go in and see what it actually is. So it's called Agent Framework Toolkit, and it sits on top of Microsoft Agent Framework as we know it, and are comprised of 5 NuGet packages. So they are called Agent Framework Toolkit, and then a provider: OpenAI, Azure OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, and xAI. They're free, of course, MIT, and you get them on NuGet. A little more on that later. But why do we need this? Well, Microsoft Agent Framework is really great. Compared to Semantic Kernel, compared to Microsoft Extensions AI, it is the perfect way of working with AI in C# in my mind. But it is very generic. And it's very generic on purpose because that is good for Microsoft, as it keeps it easier to be backwards compatible. They need to ensure backwards compatibility, and Fortune 500 companies need that, and so on. And had I been the maintainer of the Agent Framework, I would have done it exactly the same. But it is really bad for new people because it is easy to get an agent up and running, but all the other things like reasoning effort and all the different things you can set on various models, especially the non-OpenAI models, are not discoverable at all. And for us that actually know where it is quite cumbersome to do. And that is what they call breaking glass. Breaking glass meaning you go in and take the lower level parts and put extra data in so you can set reasoning effort by reasoning tokens and so on. It's mostly about reasoning, but there's also other things. So Agent Framework Toolkit is just a more opinionated thing that makes things easier in 80 to 90% of the cases. And enough talk about that. Let me show you some examples. So, for example, if you need to make an OpenAI response API agent with ChatGPT-5 and high reasoning and getting the reasoning summary out, and because it's a high reasoning and it's a big request, we need to also set a 5-minute timeout on it. To do that in the raw system, you need to, of course, new up the OpenAI client, and then you need to know that under the OpenAI client options, you can set the network timeout. Else you perhaps would never figure out how you actually set the timeout. Then you make your, from your client, you make your responses client with the model, and you turn it into an AI agent. And then you need to know that you need to have a client agent options with chat options inside, where you need to set this raw representation factory, which is just an object. And you need to know that the reason creation options is one of those you can set here. And in here you can then set the reasoning effort level and the summary verbosity. Granted, it's possible, but this is what I call cumbersome a lot of the times in my other videos. With the Agent Toolkit, you can do this. There's something called a factory for each of the providers. So we make an OpenAI agent factory, and that requires us to give an API key, because that is what OpenAI connections need. Had it been just using OpenAPI, you can of course also give the endpoint. And then you go in and create an agent, and you have 4 options: reasoning API with reasoning, reason API without reasoning, chat client with reasoning, and chat client API without reasoning. And all depending on which of those 4 you choose, you are guided through what you can set. These are just 4 of the many things you can set, which we'll see a little later on. But much easier to do, and you don't need to write as many lines of code. In the same manner, if you have an Anthropic agent, you want to hook up to Anthropic Claude 4.5, small spelling error here, I can see, and you need to set the reasoning budget for 4,000 tokens. If you do that, you need to know that you need to new up an Anthropic client. You need to know that it's called .messages as builder.build, kind of funky syntax. You need to know that you again need to have set the chat options, set the model ID in here, because it can't be set on any of the other stuff. And you need to know that max tokens is mandatory, which it's not if you just new it up here. And you need to know there's a small extension method called withThinking that can set the budget tokens raw. If you do it in Agent Framework Toolkit, you just new up a factory for Anthropic agents and give your API key like normal. You did that here as well. And then you just create an agent with the options where it forces you to set the max tokens, and right here directly you get the budget token, so you don't need to make the chat options. Behind the scenes, I have of course made all these, and there's lots and lots of code that can take care of all the different features. But for you, it's just easy to do. And if we really get creative, if we again want an open responses API agent with ChatGPT 5, we want high reasoning, we want reasoning summary, and we want timeout again. But we also want to see the tool callings middleware. So we want to get the information on what tools that are called. And we want the raw interception where we actually hook into the HTTP handler. Well, if you do that with raw code, it's a bit small to see here, but there's 130 lines of code to do that. You need to add the middleware, you need to add the... And on top of that, you only get it back as an AI agent, so structured output is very difficult to work with. Well, in Agent Framework Toolkit, you simply just add a few more lines in your create agent, where you can hook up to the event of raw call details or get the details back, and the HTTP call details. So if you're setting debugging, you can quickly add these 5 lines of code, and you can see the raw calls compared to you needing to put in all this extra work just to check if is it sending correct or is it receiving correct. So that is what we have. If you are interested in this, and by the way, these agents that I call OpenAI agent and Anthropic agent and so on, behind the scenes, they are AI agents just as normal. So they can be put into workflows and work with the rest of the system. And in general, if we look at my examples up here, you can see here's everything you can set. So you can still set the instructions. You can still set every single little thing you do. And if you I'm not seeing it here, I have put in that you can extend into the raw tool, the raw options, and the raw chat options as well from here. So there's even more so there shouldn't really be anything that you can't do with this system. Again, that will be breaking glass again on this top of this, but in 80 to 90% of the cases, you will just set these up and be ready to go. So again, on NuGet, search for Agent Fragment Toolkit, and you will see them all. You will, of course, probably only choose one of them, because that's the one you're using, but you can use multiple in the same project if need be. If you want to contribute to this, the GitHub repo is open and are accepting pull requests. And this is just a start, because the first major pain point I found with Microsoft Agent Framework was the agents and generation of those. But I also want to add more things about creating tools. It's a bit cumbersome to do that as well. And it's a bit cumbersome to get the data out of the response when it's more advanced things like text, reasoning text back and file IDs and such things. So because these are opinionated and can work behind the scenes, they will be able to give you more advanced versions than Microsoft can ever do. And that makes sense that Microsoft will not give us. And I've even talked to the team, and they have given their blessing that this is the right way to go for the community now, where we go more opinionated. Yes, we might break a little more than corporate Microsoft, but of course, that's not our intent to do. So with that, thank you for attending this. Hope you will try the new NuGet packages or give me feedback on what is missing in them if need be. Thank you.